So this evening we're looking at this topic of stepping off the emotional roller coaster. And I was thinking that um, some people, of course, like to go on roller coasters. When there's a fun fair, people actually pay money to enjoy the roller coaster ride. And so maybe not everyone's ready to get off that roller coaster. But for those of us who are ready and who would like that, let's explore what this roller coaster is all about and what are the benefits of stepping off that. So what I'll be sharing tonight will be partly from my own personal experiences and also some of the things I've learned from amazing and wonderful teachers, friends, and colleagues along the way. And for me, it's been around 40 years or so since through my parents, I came onto this spiritual journey. And one thing is for sure that when one steps on the spiritual path, there is learning at every moment. And it's for this reason that sometimes it is said it's rather like the opening of the third eye. You begin to see things which you could not see before in terms of your thoughts, your attitudes, and how it is that your approach to life is in fact influencing your relationships and the situations in your life. So as we kick off this topic tonight, I'd like to start by sharing an idea of three categories of people which I think exist in terms of how we experience everyday life. And I would say the most common is this category of those who survive. I remember when I first started working in central London back in the late 80s, then you go into your office and you say to your friends and your colleagues, "Good morning, how are you?" And most people would reply, "Well, I'm surviving." And it kind of became a cliche term just to say I'm surviving. But the question would arise in my mind that just to survive, is that enough? Just to survive and get through the day, just to survive and get through life, is that it? And survive is something which a plant would do. Survive is something which maybe a tree would do. But we're human beings. We have creativity, intelligence, perspective. We can change, we can improve our relationship with life. And so that's the first category, those who are surviving. And the next category up, I would call as those who exist. And to exist means to go through the day-to-day experiences of life. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you are praised, sometimes you are criticized, sometimes you are the center of attention, and sometimes everyone ignores you. And when you're in the existing mode, then the way you feel is at the mercy of all of those things outside of you. People, situations, and events. And that's really the life of being on the emotional roller coaster. Which means if something happens as per your wish, you feel elated. If something happens not as per your wish, you feel sad. If people are behaving according to your desire, you are happy. If people's behavior is different, you get upset or depressed. And so that's where our moods go up and down during the day. And that can be quite tiring to be on that emotional roller coaster. Or you may describe it as being an emotional pinball machine, where your mind, your emotions are just bouncing off situations, events, other people's behaviors, and so on. So there, I seem to have no control over the way I feel, and I am subject to the people around me and the situations around me. And then there is the highest group, and I would say that this is the group that we are interested to be in, and that is of those who truly live. Now, what does it mean to live? It means to go through all those experiences, and yes, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you're praised, sometimes you're criticized. All that happens, but you make a choice. The way I feel, my thoughts and my feelings are my choice and my responsibility. So in that state of consciousness, you don't allow what's happening outside to infiltrate you and rob you of your peace and your happiness. It's like the saying that the boat should move on the water, but the water should not enter into the boat. And so that's the stage where I believe one is off the emotional roller coaster and has really learned the art of living, which is connected to the art of seeing. This is a big part of stepping off the roller coaster, is knowing how to see. The difference between the existing mode and the living mode, although both groups of people may pass through similar experiences, the difference is in how I choose to see situations. It can be said, for example, that you may not be able to control what life brings to you, but you can control how you choose to receive it. You may not be able to control what life puts in front of you, but you can control how you choose to see it. Now, for the most part, I find people focus upon what life is bringing to them, whether it's in the form of situations or people. And if they don't like it, then they say, why is this happening to me? Why are these situations happening to me? Why is such and such a person behaving like this towards me? So when my mind is consumed by what I don't like, naturally there will be stress and there will be ups and downs in my emotions. But rather than that, if I shift my focus on how do I choose to receive this? How do I choose to see this? Can I see this situation differently? Can I upgrade my vision of this situation or this person? So when the focus goes on that part, I begin to learn, I begin to grow. And people who are in the living mode, they grow through adversity. They grow through criticism. They grow through failure. Why? Because they have learned to see things from another angle. We'll talk a bit more about that later. And the whole of life, I believe, is very much connected with the mind and how well we have learned to use the mind. Now, think of any machine that you may buy, whether it's a phone or it's a car or it's a fridge. But along with that machine, you also receive a user manual. And this manual tells you how to maintain the machine and also how to use it correctly. And so the question arises, where is the user manual for the mind? How is the mind supposed to be used? What kind of thoughts are healthy in the morning? What sort of attitude should I have towards a situation I don't particularly like? How should be my relationship with failure? there's a whole science, there's a whole area of education of learning how to use the mind correctly. But mostly for people in city life, this is something we don't pay attention to. It has been said very beautifully by Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor: the quality of your life depends on the quality of your mind. The mind is the interface between my inner world and the outer world. And what mostly I find people do is they have this approach that if I can control life, which means people and situations, then I'll be happy, I'll be secure, I'll be safe. But the news is you cannot control life. Between me and life, there is my mind. The thing to do is to learn to have my mind in my control. If my mind is in my control, then life would not be able to stress me. But making that shift from trying to control life to controlling the mind, that's the work. That's the spiritual journey. And I believe that's the beautiful journey which we all need to go on now, especially these days where life, time is telling us, have a look at yourself and see to what extent your mind and your emotions are in your own control. It's sometimes said that sports is ultimately a mind game. Business is a mind game. Politics is a mind game. And I believe life is the ultimate mind game. And so let's explore a bit more closely about what we need to pay attention to in order to handle these emotions. There's two main things which I think we work on in this inner spiritual journey, which helps to bring the mind under control and therefore also the emotions under control. And that is, one is looking at your vision of life and seeing how you can upgrade that. The second is looking at your level of inner strength. So we're going to be exploring these two things tonight. I have also a few little diagrams that I'd like to share with you. I'm usually a visual person, a whiteboard person. Can you see this? I think it's quite clear. Yeah. So just as a starter, it's telling us about, like this, like that. Okay. Tells us about three kinds of intelligence that we require in order to live life well and successfully. So the one we're most used to hearing about is, of course, IQ, which is our rational intelligence, logic, reason, analysis. And you need IQ to deal with things. Things means organizing things, physical things, planning, and so on. And this one you know about. Usually if somebody scores high on an IQ test, we say she or he is very intelligent. But then there's another one here, which is EQ, and that, as you would know, is a person's emotional intelligence. And that's really concerned with two things. One is your ability to understand and manage your own emotions, and also your ability to pick up how others are feeling. And EQ you require especially in the context of people and dealing with relationships. It's an essential skill if you're working with others. It's an essential skill also in families, in groups of people. If you can manage your own emotions, then you are able to understand and pick up how others are feeling. For example, think of being in a bad mood? And how long does your bad mood last? What would you say? How long is the average Bradford bad mood? A few minutes? A couple of hours? A day or two? No? Well, we all sometimes, get irritated, frustrated. But what's important is how quickly I lift myself up out of that, back to balance, back to self-respect. Because when one is in a bad mood, it's like there is a sign here saying, don't talk to me today. I'm not in the mood. And of course, being in a bad mood means I'm useless to myself and I'm also useless to other people. And especially in a work setting, others have to wait until I recover from that bad mood before they can communicate with me, talk to me, get responses from me. And of course, that's the area we're looking at tonight, is the emotional intelligence. Just to complete this model, the highest intelligence is known as SQ, which stands for a person's spiritual intelligence. And that's another huge topic to look at. It's not our topic for tonight. The two main things that SQ is concerned with, one is your sense of identity, and the other is your sense of purpose in your life. Two huge issues. So let's look at emotions, where they come from, why they happen, and how to deal with them. Now, one of the areas in which emotions flare up is, of course, relationships. And generally, I find it is the case that everybody has one person who seems to be very adept, very good at pushing your buttons. Do you have one such person in your life who is a world expert at pushing your buttons? Yeah, maybe at work, but probably that person is at home in some form. Usually it's someone we are close to, it's someone who knows us very well. And sometimes it feels as though that person has been strategically parachuted into our life just to give us anguish. So what to do if somebody is pushing our buttons? How to stop someone from pushing our buttons? What generally tends to happen when somebody pushes our buttons is we look for theirs to push back. And then we may get engaged in a button pushing contest. You push mine, I push yours, you push mine, and so on. And of course, a lot of energy is wasted and a lot of anxiety and sorrow is exchanged. So how to stop this? How to get out of this game of pushing buttons and therefore saving myself from getting in that emotional mess? Well, the only real solution is I learn to deactivate my buttons. In other words, I learn to develop greater self-control. I learn to not take the bait. And when I do that, the next time a person pushes that particular button, there's no reaction. Now think, for example, of when you go into a lift, and if you push the button and the lift doesn't work, what do? You might push all the buttons and say, what's wrong with this lift? But eventually you get the message which the lift is giving that we're not going anywhere. And so you come out and you take the stairs. In much the same way, as I learn how to have greater self-control, it's giving a non-verbal message to the other. Non-verbal message. And that message is, you can no longer upset me. You can no longer make me angry. Non-verbal. Do not say it to the person, but your behavior will give that message. And that message will then cause the other to change their behavior towards you. This is, of course, the long-term answer, but it's the only real answer. And one of the principles of spirituality in relationships is do not ask to be respected, but work on raising your self-respect. The more you raise your self-respect, then naturally respect comes to you. And then you don't get pulled into the emotional games. If my self-respect is low, I will demand respect from others. If my self-respect is high, I will command respect from others very naturally. And this is the message of spirituality. The first step, let me respect my true self. What does it mean to respect myself? It means I choose to own my peace and my happiness. No matter what happens, no matter who says what, my peace of mind and my happiness is my personal property, full stop, non-negotiable. I have to make that pledge or that commitment to my own self. I must take care of my peace of mind and my happiness. That is called respecting my true self. And if I learn to do that, I'll move through life, through relationships, with an emotional stability. Naturally, it'll upgrade, it'll improve the way other people treat me, the way other people deal with me. Indeed, it's true to say that my relationship with myself will be reflected in how other people relate to me. And that's really what the study of Raja Yoga meditation is about, is healing, fixing, and making perfect my relationship with my own self. Okay? So now we move on to the next thing, and I'm hoping these things are practical and useful for you. The next thing to look into, which causes the emotions to go up and down, is wanting things. So now I've got another piece of paper to show you. As you see, I used to like physics when I was at school. So can you see this? So two sentences. Here is, I don't get what I want, and that leads to disappointment. Second one, I get what I don't want, or who I don't want, and that leads to stress. So what we want to do here is to change C. We'd rather not feel disappointed. We'd rather not have stress in our lives. So in order to change C, which of these two do we have to change, A or B? Now I'll answer for you because I can't hear you. If we work on the getting part or the not getting part, then that is called the materialistic approach to life. Working on putting my energies to getting, which is what mostly we do in life, that's where it's like you're chasing after a shadow to get what you want. But the spiritual approach to life is saying, don't worry about the getting part, focus on the wanting part. We explore, what is all this wanting business about? Why do I want? And the wanting can be on many different levels. And here I'm going to term wanting as desires. What are these desires that the mind is chasing? Why do I desire what I desire? What is behind these desires? As long as the mind is chasing after desires, there will always be some anguish, some anxiety, and some insecurity. And chasing after one's temporary desires is like chasing after a shadow, your own shadow. Now, can you ever catch your own shadow? The more you run, the further away it will go from you, and you will end up exhausted. That's what happens to the mind when it generates desires, runs after them, and it feels tired. Here is another little model to show what happens when we generate temporary desires and we chase after them. So 3 possible scenarios. Is that okay? So temporary desires. Let's say you want something, but somebody stops you from getting what you want. So since the mind has generated that desire, generated an energy, the energy of that desire will change into anger. And you could perhaps see this most obviously, most easily in maybe a child who is not given what he or she is demanding, may feel angry. And when that anger gets directed at an individual, then it changes into hatred. You give that person a special place in your mind. This is the person who stopped me from getting such and such a thing. Scenario 2. I want something, I can't have it, but there is no one to blame. For example, I want to go somewhere, but there are no flights, or the roads are blocked. So what happens to the energy of that desire? It may change into disappointment, frustration, and when we circulate and keep playing those scenes in our mind when things did not work out for me, then we can drive ourselves into feeling a little depressed. What about if you want something, but somebody else gets what you want, what you desire? Then this leads to the energy of jealousy. And we know how dangerous jealousy is. It leads to all kinds of dangerous behaviors. So all of these different emotions, anger, frustration, jealousy, and so on, to some degree, everyone experiences them in their lives, some a bit more, some a bit less. But what is the root cause of them? Where do these emotions come from? And as shown in the diagram there, these are all the results of the temporary desires of the mind. Where there are temporary desires, either they'll be fulfilled and then they'll generate more desires. It's never satisfied. One desire fulfilled will give birth to another one and another one and another one. Or it's not fulfilled, which leads to these kinds of emotions. So what to do? How can we handle these temporary desires and stop the mind from chasing after them? Well, the good news is there is another kind of desire that the soul also has. And those we call as the eternal desires of the soul. What are they? Well, let's have a look here. Okay, so lots of writing here. I'm hoping these little visuals are useful and will help to explain the concepts. So temporary desires here. What kind of temporary desires do we have? Well, some of them here, the obvious ones maybe for for things, for objects, that which we call as possessions, some kind of property, or we desire some position or status. And then there are the other ones, the more subtle ones, which we may not even realize are driving our behavior, especially in relationships. So I may desire, for example, some appreciation or acknowledgement. Let's say I do a lot of good work. I work very hard. I do a lot of good things. Now, it's good to do that. But underneath that, I may also have the desire that somebody should appreciate what I'm doing. I want some acknowledgement. And if that desire is not met, then I may get upset, I may get angry, I may feel rejected. So the emotion is generated because of the unfulfilled desire. And these desires are so subtle, we may not even realize that they're working within us. Furthermore, the desire for attention, and that's a very obvious one to see, attention-seeking behavior, the desire to be accepted by an individual or a group of people, and the other ones, the desire for approval, to be admired, desire to be validated. And so this is the whole game of the mind. And one of the important things to check in a spiritual approach to life is not just to see what I'm doing, but to see my motive behind what I am doing. And if my motive is chasing after the temporary desires, my emotions will always go up and down. If I am subject to the result of my desires, then my emotions can never be stable. How to be free from this world of desires, from being pulled and pushed by the temporary desires? So here, what we're saying is focus on the eternal desires. The eternal desires of the soul are these: peace, love, joy, self-respect, the basic ones. And in fact, behind every temporary desire, there is an eternal desire. The temporary desires are our wants. The eternal desires are our needs. So go for the needs, don't go for the wants. And if you really analyze it, everything a person does in their life is reflecting the need to experience peace or love or joy, three main things, which then constitute self-respect. If, for example, we look at that appreciation desire, and I say that I'm working so hard around here, nobody appreciates me, so I quit. I'm not doing it anymore. What a person is really saying is, I don't feel loved. I don't feel valued. I need some love, please. But the words which are being used is, nobody appreciates me. Behind every limited desire, temporary desire, there is an eternal desire. The materialistic life, the life which we're generally surrounded by, is have lots of temporary desires, run after them and get them fulfilled, then you'll be happy. But it's a never-ending wild goose chase. Spiritual approach to life, and the further good news, is all of these, peace, love, joy, and so on, they all exist already within the soul. But they are there in seed form. And those seeds need to be watered. When you water those seeds, they begin to emerge. What does it mean to water those seeds? It means to pay attention. It means to keep in your awareness the thought, I am a peaceful soul. I am a joyful soul. Whatever you give attention to is what you are giving life to. And if you are aware of your spiritual identity, you're acting at the very core of your being. Your need for stability, safety, security, and strength is coming from the very core of your consciousness. The more full you feel internally, the less will be your temporary desires from people and of things and objects. This makes you not only emotionally very stable, but very, very useful to all the people in your life. Why? Because your sense of neediness from others begins to reduce. Your capacity to give, to share, to help, to support, that capacity increases. So you become a real radiant person, radiating peace, goodness, happiness in your life and in your relationships. Okay, is that okay so far? All right, there's a few more things to look at. Another interesting, important aspect of getting off that roller coaster, especially in relationships, is knowing how to have the right, healthy spiritual distance between you and any other person. Now, I find that in some countries, and I would say mostly Northern European countries, and maybe one or two others, people tend to be like this, quite far from each other. Where I live, here in the Mediterranean, people tend to be a bit more like this. Now, this is not so good, emotionally distant, but also this is not so good. But I believe the right way to be with others, whoever they are, is to be like this. So be close, be loving, be supportive, be kind, be respectful, but don't be stuck. When you get emotionally stuck to any person, whether it's a family or a friend or any other person, then if that person has a bad day or goes a bit crazy one day, you will also be affected very much by that. Your mind will also lose its peace and be unstable and upset or worried. But if you're like this, and that person has a bad day or goes a bit crazy one day, you are still stable. Your stability will help the other one to also stabilize. Now, this is the perfect balance in relationship of two things. Now, within relationships, again, any kind of relationship, we value the exchange of love and respect. But what is this word love? What do we mean by that? And what does it need to be balanced with? Any virtue has a corresponding balance in order to keep it clean, in order to keep it that which gives happiness and gives well-being. What does love need to be balanced with? So here comes next diagram. All right. Okay. All right. So here is the love part. But being loving with others must be balanced with being detached from them at the same time. These two things go together. Detachment and love are partners. When the detachment is missing, the love becomes corrupted. So this diagram is showing if there is too much emphasis on the loving part, being too loving, too much love, that love will change into possession. You try to own that person. And you try to control that person to behave as you want them to behave. If that doesn't work, you put pressure on them to conform to your wishes. And furthermore, this then leads to making demands. Unless you do this, I will do that, I won't do the other, and so on and so forth. It becomes a dependency, there are jealousies, it becomes attachment. So this, which started off as a high emotional experience, then leads to something which gives a lot of anguish and pain. People giving pain to each other in that relationship. Why? Because the love became corrupted. In order to keep the love clean and pure, it must be balanced with detachment. Now, if there's too much focus upon detachment only, then a person ends up becoming a little bit cold, a bit distant, formal, aloof, a bit uncaring, very, very distant, and the feeling is that person is like not even there. So some people are too much on the loving side, some people too much on the detachment side. But the aim of living a spiritual life and spiritualizing our relationships is we reach that center point where I'm balanced in detachment and love, even with the people who are the most closest to you, even with those at home. When there is not detachment, then what happens is we also form unreal expectations of other people. And expectations are an invitation to irritation. So if I get irritated, it's not because of the other, it's because of the expectations I have of the other. So how to reach this balance point, how to keep the love pure and clean, there, what's important is spiritualizing my vision. Think of this, that when you see another person, what's the first thing you see? Do you see that this person is my wife or husband or son or daughter? Or do you see the race or the skin color of the person? Or do you see the nationality of the person, or the religion of the person, or the socio-economic group that person belongs to? Or do I see, here is another spiritual energy, here is another soul? That's called the first level of relationship, is our soul-to-soul relationship, our spiritual relationship. But today what's happened is the first level of relationship has been suppressed. And everyone lives in the second layer of relationship, where you see somebody only as I said, family person, or race or nationality or religion and so on. Because of that, there are all these emotional ups and downs in relationships. In order to fix this, the practice should be, I see myself as a spiritual energy, the inner being, visualize the self as the soul energy. And when I see another person, the first thing I should be aware of is, here is another soul. Soul to soul vision, soul conscious vision. That is the thing we really need to practice in order to go beyond our own expectations and desires of another person. Plus, when you really see somebody else as a soul, then you don't absorb that person's stressful emotions. Your fear of that person would reduce. You don't get affected by the anger of that person. Why we absorb somebody's anger, stress, negative emotions is because I'm in a very ordinary awareness. And I find that this is really a lifelong project, but extremely powerful, and it's the right of everyone to do it. Experience the self as the spiritual energy, the soul, And in daily life, practice to first see another as a soul, and then as a family member or nationality, etc., etc. And we'll do some of that practice in the meditation a bit later. Okay, so how are we doing? About 10 minutes more. So many things to share. This is such a huge topic. Well, next thing really is to be aware of our level of inner strength. As I mentioned, two things are important. One is your vision of life, and two is your level of inner strength. If your level of inner strength is high, then you'll be able to control the mind and emotions more easily. But how to take care of our inner strength? So for that, we have to learn how to build into our lives certain practices so we conserve the energy of our thoughts. Now, there are many people who do meditation, but there are relatively few people who are meditators. What's the difference between the two? Many do meditation as a technique to be still, to deal with the challenges of life, to calm down, to handle stress, and that can be enough for a person. But to be a meditator means it's a lifestyle. It means as you go through the day, one part of you is naturally vigilant and checking, what kind of thoughts am I having? Am I thinking too much? Am I wasting this precious energy of thought power? Now, think, for example, of an athlete who wishes to win the gold medal in the races. So for her or for him, eating healthy is a lifestyle. Such a person will naturally be aware what I eat, when I eat, how much I eat. Because for an athlete, to maintain optimum weight is essential. In the same way, a meditator is like a mental athlete. Meditators are aware the most precious energy I have is the energy of my thoughts. I don't want to waste this energy. Life is a game of thoughts. And when you're overthinking, overspending the thought energy, the mind becomes weak. When the mind is weak, then patience level goes down, tolerance level goes down, we misunderstand people, we create mountains out of molehills, and our emotions are all up and down. So some simple suggestions in how to take better care of the mind, and again, probably many of you are doing this already. The first thing is when you wake up in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, the first thing, before I engage with life, before talking to another person, before engaging with your phone, first to engage with the inner self. First, let me be with myself before being with anyone else. And that means spend a few moments in silent reflection, in meditation. Charge the battery of the soul first thing in the morning. And this is so important, and it's also tragic that in big cities, we tend to have forgotten the value of the early morning hours. Now, it is said, is it not, if a person is having a bad day, she or he may say, you know what, I must have got out of the wrong side of the bed today. Yeah? They say that, right? Which means that the day started off incorrectly and it's having an effect on the rest of the day. But the opposite is also true. If I start the day off well, it's going to positively influence the whole day. The best way to start the day is with some silence, some meditation, experience, I am a peaceful soul. Dwell on that thought. And this is charging your soul battery first thing in the morning. If you have this experience in the morning, it will help your emotions to be stable during the day when challenges come, difficulties come. Second thing, again, many of you may be doing already, is during the day, practicing something called as traffic control for the mind. Imagine the thoughts in your mind are like the cars in the street. The question arises, how is the traffic up here? Is it flowing? Is it orderly? Is it coordinated? Or is there a traffic jam in the mind? Now we know that when there is a traffic jam, so much time and energy is wasted. Everybody's beeping at each other to get out of the way. And one car parked in the wrong place can block 100 other cars. So too, one weak thought, one waste thought, one negative thought can block the flow of my happiness, my creativity, my positivity. The traffic control for the mind is where you try to stop for 3 minutes or so, at least a couple of times in the day, and you just visit the peace which is within your consciousness. In other words, a mini meditation. Again, we'll do that in a few moments. It's rather like going from the doing realm to the being realm for just a few minutes and refreshing your mind. That has the effect that when you then come back into your meeting, your conversation, your work, you feel more stable, your head feels more clear, and your decision making is much more sharp. You may describe these as speed humps in the road. To slow down the speed of speeding drivers, you have these speed humps, or some call them sleeping policemen. So when the car comes to that speed hump, it needs to slow down. In the same way, to break the mind's habit of speeding, build these traffic control moments or speed humps, one mid-morning, let's say 10:30 or so, one mid-afternoon, let's say about 2:30. And if this is new for you, then try this every day for 1 week and see how you feel at the end of that 1 week. And people usually report they feel much more stable, more peaceful, and their mind is much more pleasant. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop there.